Welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about creating your first session. First thing we're going to look at is the dashboard. This is your main dialog box that you'll see when you create a new session. You can get to the dashboard in Pro Tools by selecting File and Create New, and then also using the shortcut Command-N on a Mac. And this allows you to do four things really. It allows you to create a new blank session or create a new session from template, open any of the 10 most recent sessions you've worked on, or open any other session on your hard drives. So I'm going to use the shortcut Command-N, and it'll bring us to the dashboard. As far as shortcuts go, you can use Command and up or down arrows to scroll between the Create menu or submenu, the Recent menu, and the Projects menu. Under the Create menu, you can deselect Create from Template to create just a blank session, or you can select the Create from Template button and then choose a specific template that works for the genre of music that you are working on. I've created my own template, and I suggest most of you do this. That way you make sure you get the kind of functionality that you're looking for. So you can create a blank session by deselecting Create from Template and then just naming your session and clicking Create. If you have this button down here selected, Prompt for Location, it will ask where you want to save that. So if I click on here, it's going to say, where do you want to save it? And it'll allow me to save it in a number of different locations. I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of that and go Command New again. If you select Create from Template, you can obviously choose one of these templates and create your own new session from a pre-existing template. And there's a variety of templates to choose from based on the type of hardware configuration you have or the genre of music that you're working in. Here you can also select your file types. WAV or AIFF files are the native Pro Tools formats. You can choose your sample rates. Remember, we talked about those earlier. So here are all of your sample rates. Remember, they're all multiples of 2, 44.1 or 48. So 44.1, 88.2, and 176.4, or 48, 96, and 192. You can also choose your bit depth here, and you can choose which I/O settings to use. I usually just leave this and leave it on last used. Prompt for location, we just discussed a little bit earlier. You could also just select the specific location you always want Pro Tools to go to. I keep my session files in a few different places depending on if I'm working on a library project or a personal project or whatever. So I usually just click and leave this on Prompt for Location. Lastly, you can set this dialog box to open anytime you start up Pro Tools. So that's where you disable that if you don't want this dashboard dialog box to show up whenever you start Pro Tools. If you have a collaboration or a cloud account, you can access that here. I presently don't have one, but this is where you can save your session to the cloud and allow other collaborators to work on the project with you. The last few things to cover in the dashboard are interleave files, and then also talking a little bit about hard drive management based on the bit depth or sample rate that you happen to choose for your session. An interleave file pertains to stereo files. So Pro Tools can handle stereo files in two different ways. You can either handle them as a separate .left and .right file for a stereo channel, or it can deal with what's called an interleave file where the left and right audio files are kind of wound together. So they're one audio file even though they contain two different channels of discrete information. Usually I just leave these interleaved. That way I have less files to look at over here in the left side of the screen. As well as if you're exporting sessions and somebody else is going to import your audio files into another DAW, they don't have to deal with a separate .left and .right file for every stereo file. Every time you increase the bit depth or sample rate, you're going to increase a few things: the size of the hard drive that you'll need to support your session, as well as the capacity of your computer as far as CPU power goes. So whenever you double your sample rate, you're essentially doubling the processing power required to handle that higher sample rate. Same with bit depth. So you need to be aware of that when you're choosing sample rates. It's not always best to choose the very highest. As a matter of fact, most sessions that I do are either 44.1, 48, occasionally 88.2, and 96. I rarely do a session in these higher formats. Now once you've created your session, assuming you created a blank session, you'll wind up with something that looks like the screen in front of you. This is essentially a blank Pro Tools session, doesn't have any tracks. So the first thing we need to do is to add some tracks in Pro Tools to either import audio that's already existing onto those tracks, or to create MIDI data on a track, or create new audio data on a track. So to do that, we come up to the track drop-down menu and we select New. Also, you can see there's a shortcut associated with that. You need to learn that one, Shift-Command-N. So I'll use that right now. Shift-Command-N opens up the New Tracks dialog box. Here you can choose the format of the track, mono, stereo. You can even add surround tracks. Also the track type, so audio, auxiliary input, master fader, VCA master, MIDI, instrument, and video tracks. Those are all the options that are available. We'll go into more detail about those a little bit later. Next, here to the right, you can see sample and tick-based tracks. We'll discuss that as well later. And then here is a plus button that allows you to add additional rows. So you can add additional rows or reduce the amount of rows that you have. So this way you could say I want to add one stereo audio track, maybe 5 mono audio tracks, and then maybe 4 MIDI tracks, something like that. So I'll choose MIDI here, and then I can create these tracks. Now, it's important to note that whatever order you have these tracks in is the order that they will appear here in Pro Tools when you add them. So if I decide, oh, I want my MIDI tracks in the middle of my stereo audio and my mono audio track, you can just grab this little handlebar to the right and move it around. There are also some shortcuts that you might find handy to use that help you navigate through these various drop-down menus. Most of these are command and then the up and down arrows or left and right arrows. So I'm holding command, hitting the up arrow, it takes me to audio track, and then command and down arrow. Each time I hit the down arrow, it takes me through this list of available tracks. Over here, to choose whether you want a mono or stereo track, it's command and left arrow or right arrow. So again, left and right arrow just takes you from mono, and then right arrow will take you to the next one, stereo, etc. So right arrow, holding down command modifier, and right arrow taking me forward, and left arrow taking me back. Also, if you want to add another row, shift, command, and the down arrow will add various rows, and then again, shift, command, and up arrow will reduce the rows. So those are the associated shortcuts to the New Tracks dialog box. Really help you add the tracks that you need quickly. Okay, I'm going to add a few tracks now, and we're going to talk about track types. So Shift Command N, I'm going to go 1 mono, and I'm going to go Shift Command down arrow, and then Command right arrow, and 1 stereo audio track, and then Shift Command down arrow, and then I'm going to go down arrow to add 1 auxiliary input track, Shift Command down arrow, Command right arrow, or I'm sorry, Command down arrow. We'll add a MIDI track, Shift Command down arrow, Command right, Command down arrow. I keep making this a mistake. And then an instrument track, and lastly, we will do a master fader. So I'm going to add all these now to my session. So here are all of our various track types that you can have inside of Pro Tools. So an audio track allows you to record audio onto that specific track. So I can easily go here and go to where my voice is. You can see the input, and then all I got to do is hit record, and I'm recording my audio. You can also import audio from a variety of locations and drop it onto an audio track, whether it's stereo or mono. You can see that this is a mono track and this is a stereo track because it has two vertical level meters. So that's the job of an audio track, is to record or to house audio data. An auxiliary input track is a track that's used to route audio. So if you look at my vocal here that I'm speaking through, this right here, this is an auxiliary input track, and its job is just to route audio. In this case, it's routing it from my input through the speakers to output 1 and 2. So that's the job of an auxiliary input track, just to route audio. You can see there are no record or input monitoring buttons like there are here on an audio track. So you can't record anything onto this, but you can route audio. Third type of track is a MIDI track. This is used to record MIDI data. And so I have a MIDI keyboard here in front of me. If I play that and hit record, you can see it's recording the MIDI data onto this MIDI track. It doesn't hold any audio data at all, it just holds MIDI data. So I actually have to take this MIDI data and assign it to play some virtual instrument or some hardware instrument in my studio. Next is an instrument track. Instrument tracks are really a combination of a MIDI track and an auxiliary input track. Now, what that means is that you can record MIDI onto an instrument track. Let me just record enable the instrument track. Like that. And then I can record MIDI onto this instrument track. And then I can also place a virtual instrument on this instrument track and route its audio. So I could, for example, assign a virtual instrument. Let's just pick something quick. Let's just see what this does. Yeah, and now when I play my beautiful piece of music that I've written, awesome. Next, horror film. You can see it's routing the audio and the MIDI data through the same track. So it's kind of a combination between an auxiliary input and a MIDI track. Master fader is just a fader that shows you the overall volume coming out of your Pro Tools rig.